Hey guys, it's Victor here. Today I'm going to be talking about why I identify as queer rather than as transgender. Whenever someone asks me how I identify, I always say queer because I feel like the other four letters in the acronym are too restrictive, at least for me. I identify as gender fluid between transmasculine and non-binary. This would make me a very good candidate to be under the T trans umbrella. If I could easily be considered under the T trans umbrella, then why would I identify as queer instead? I think a lot of this kind of comes down to my timeline of self-discovery. So I knew that I liked women a long time before I actively recognized that I was not female. I think this gave me a certain affinity and self-affiliation with the LGBTQ+ community before I was kind of in this transgender category, or at least before I knew I was in this transgender category. While I always knew that gender was an issue for me, even as a very young child, I think I bottled that up and pushed that down a lot more than I did my sexuality. And so because of this, I really explored my sexuality first and recognized in myself that I was not into men at all and that women was more of my demographic for people that I like to date and be in relationships with. I never quite felt comfortable with the term lesbian because to me that always had a very female gendered connotation to it, and that just like never sat well with me ever. So I would just usually say that I was gay in like the broader sense of like same-sex attraction, if that makes any sense. It wasn't really until after I had started actively dating that I really started to be more open-minded about this world of gender and non-cisgenderness. I think by the time I started being comfortable putting kind of trans-related labels on myself, that I was already very comfortable with the idea of being in the LGBTQ+ community. I think that saying that I identify as trans and as nothing else would be a little bit, it would feel like I was cheating myself a little bit almost, and that I was maybe even looking back on my history and how far I had come between when I was a child and where I am now. To further complicate things, I think whenever you're talking about being transgender or any kind of gender nonconformance or gender non-binariness, there is some inherent element of homosexuality, unless someone is asexual or aromantic or something like that. Think of it this way, if we're speaking in strictly binary terms, like we only have gender A and gender B, and of course we know that we have gender like A, B, and like gender C, D, X, Y, Z, like there are all the genders, but if we're thinking exclusively in terms of binary terms, if someone is gender A, and they grow up being attracted to gender A, then already there's some level of like homosexual attraction there, right? And then when they transition to gender B, then they still had like maybe at one point what they would have considered like a homosexual attraction, right? On the other hand, if someone is gender A and starts out being attracted to gender B, then when they transition to gender B, then it's gender B attracted to gender B, and then there's all the gayness. Woo! Then when you add non-binary identities into the mix, then it's pretty clear there's not really any way to rationalize how any of it is straight, right? Because then there's like mixes of genders and everything. I mean, if you're a non-binary person that identifies as straight, then good for you. You do you. That's fantastic. But for me as a non-binary person, I can't really rationalize being straight. Like, to me, even though like I'm trans-masc and date women, like to me I still like the straightness is not there. Not for me, just not a label that I feel comfortable with. So yeah, the short version of all of that is that being gender fluid and kind of non-binary, kind of trans-ish, just makes all of the feelings kind of weird when it comes to names and labels and all of that. So I think it's just easier to say queer because it's like an umbrella term and it's inclusive and you don't have to be anything specific in order to be queer. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, for me, it's about being inclusive of all of myself, including all of my history. And that the term queer, like really, it extends like all the way into my childhood, where like you could easily say that I was queer for like my entire life. Whereas I think at various points in my life, the L have felt like kind of okay, and the B has felt like kind of okay, and the T has felt like kind of okay, but like none of them I feel like scream, yes, this is my identity. And so I think that's why the Q is really comfy for me. But yeah, if you identify as Q, let me know in the comments how you identify and why. Alright, that's all I've got for today. Until next time.